Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down one of the most intense and pivotal chapters in the entire Bible, Matthew 27. We'll be leaning on insights from the Enduring Word Commentary to really get a handle on the trial, the death, and the burial of Jesus. So, we're going to walk through this story pretty much as it happened, exploring what each of these moments really meant, from the shady political moves in the governor's court all the way to that silent, guarded tomb at the end. All right, let's dive right in with the trial. So, here's where it all kicks off. The Jewish High Court, the Sanhedrin, they've condemned Jesus, but there's a problem. Under Roman rule, they can't actually execute anyone. To get what they want, they have to go through the one guy in the whole region who has that kind of power, the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. Now, you'd think this would be an easy win for the religious leaders. I mean, Pilate was not a nice guy. The ancient writer Philo described him as known for continual murders and just, well, never-ending inhumanity. So they probably expected him to just rubber stamp the execution. But for some reason, something about Jesus gives this notoriously brutal governor a moment of pause. Meanwhile, while all this is happening with Pilate, the betrayer, Judas, is just completely overcome with guilt. He throws a silver back, and tragically, he takes his own life. And the commentary here draws a really sharp and important line between remorse and repentance. See, Judas felt remorse. He was horrified by the consequences of what he did. But he didn't have repentance, which is being sorry for the sin itself and turning back to God. It's a subtle but crucial difference. Okay, so back to Pilates. He can tell Jesus is innocent, and he sees right through the political games the priests are playing. So he tries to find a way out of this mess. He digs up a Passover custom where he can release one prisoner, probably hoping the crowd will make what seems like the most obvious, logical choice. And for Pilate, the evidence that Jesus is innocent is just piling up. First, he knows the motive here isn't justice, it's pure envy. Second, he sees how Jesus carries himself with this quiet strength, not defending himself. And then, get this, his own wife sends him an urgent message telling him to have nothing to do with this just man because she's had a terrible, disturbing dream about him. So Pilate lays out the choice. On one hand, you have Barabbas, a known revolutionary and murderer, basically what we might call a terrorist today. On the other hand, you have Jesus. But the chief priests get to work, stirring up the crowd. And the people make an absolutely stunning choice. They demand freedom for the violent criminal. When Pilate pushes back, he asks, why? What crime has he actually committed? The crowd doesn't offer a shred of evidence. There's no legal argument. All they do is shout, louder and louder, this furious demand for crucifixion, one of the most savage and humiliating ways a Roman could kill someone. So that's it. The decision is made. Pilate literally washes his hands of the whole thing, and the Roman soldiers take Jesus. What follows is this systematic, cruel, and deeply ironic mockery of his claim to be a king. Every single symbol of royalty gets twisted into an instrument of pain. They throw an old, cast-off soldier's cloak on him to mimic a royal purple robe. They weave a crown from long, sharp thorns and press it into his scalp. And for a scepter, a symbol of power, they put a weak, flimsy reed in his hand. It's just a perfect, horrifying picture of their total scorn. After a brutal whipping called a scourging, which was so violent it often killed people on its own, Jesus is led away to be crucified at a place called Golgotha. The Romans really perfected crucifixion. Their goal was to inflict the maximum amount of pain for the longest possible time. In fact, its horror is so profound, it's literally built into our language. The English word excruciating comes directly from the Latin ex cruce, which means out of the cross. When you look at the medical analysis of crucifixion, it's just a slow, agonizing process. The victim would have to constantly push up on the nails in their feet just to get a single breath, which would start this horrific cycle of searing pain, muscle cramps, exhaustion, and eventually suffocation. And we have to understand, this was not a normal execution. The famous Roman statesman Cicero called it an abominable act. This was a punishment saved for the lowest of the low, the worst criminals. It was a public spectacle of torture considered way too horrific for any actual Roman citizen to ever have to endure. Then, right in the middle of the day, from noon until 3 in the afternoon, something supernatural happens, and the focus shifts from the physical suffering to a spiritual agony that is almost impossible to comprehend. This strange, unnatural darkness just falls over everything. Now, the commentary is quick to point out this couldn't have been a solar eclipse. Passover always happens during a full moon, and you can't have a solar eclipse during a full moon. This darkness was something else. It was a visual symbol of God's judgment on sin being poured out on Jesus. And out of that darkness, Jesus cries out. Now think about this. For the first and only time in any of the Gospels, he doesn't call God Father. At this moment, he is bearing the crushing weight of all of humanity's sin, and he's experiencing this profound, terrifying spiritual separation from the Father. And at the exact instant that Jesus dies, back at the temple in Jerusalem, the veil, this massive, thick curtain that separated the holiest place from all the people, is ripped in two. And the detail here is so important. It's torn from the top to the bottom. This wasn't done by human hands. This was an act of God, symbolizing that the way to him was now wide open for everyone. Seeing all of this, the earthquake, the darkness, the way Jesus died, a hardened Roman centurion makes a confession. And think about who this is. This is a professional executioner. He's seen death 100 times, but he sees this and he can't deny it anymore. So Jesus' body is taken down from the cross and laid in a brand new, unused tomb by a wealthy disciple, Joseph of Arimathea. It seems like it's all over, but his enemies, they aren't finished yet. They're still afraid. They're worried that Jesus' disciples will come, steal the body, and then claim he was resurrected. So they go to Pilate and get permission to make the tomb as secure as humanly possible. They throw everything they have at it: a massive stone, an official Roman seal, which meant breaking it was a capital crime, and a full guard of disciplined Roman soldiers to stand watch. And here's the ultimate irony. In their effort to prevent any kind of deception, they accidentally set the stage for the most powerful, undeniable proof of the resurrection. Every single thing they did to control the situation, the stone, the seal, the soldiers, it all just served to magnify the power of what was about to happen. They used the full might of the Roman Empire to make sure a dead man stayed in a tomb, and in doing so, they created the perfect conditions to prove that only God could get him out.